Pretty good.
Not bad, thank you.
So, we've all been waiting for the counteroffensive, and I think there's arguments to be made. All right, I am getting a beeping noise coming in, so I'm not sure where that's coming from, but I'll let you guys know.
It's at my end.
All right, if you can mute for at least until, and we're going to be asking you questions pretty quick, so you'll have to unmute pretty soon. But in the interim, we have all been really waiting for the counteroffensive, and it's funny because I was sitting there wondering, why is this so important to everybody? It's important to me, and I want to sit there and say, why am I? Is it bloodlust? Is it? No, it's because all of us want to see justice done, and we want to see Ukraine liberated as quickly as possible. And when we're just sort of sitting there watching a grinding war of attrition, and Ukraine does not have the ability to move forward the way it should, it affects all of us. So the U.S. has said that the offensive has started. I think there's still some questions as to whether or not it's probing or it's a full offensive yet, but for the intents and purposes, I think we can sit there and say it has started, and all of us are not only thankful, but we are watching with glee, as it seems to be that they're falling back, and with some sadness as we realize that, as with any counteroffensive, there's going to be losses. So with that all said, Operator Starsky, could you please fill us in on what we've been seeing over the last week in the war in Ukraine?
Over the last week, we saw Ukrainian armed forces liberating 7 villages in several days. which is 7 times more than the mighty Russian army managed to capture this year. I'm talking about Solidar, for example. And we saw another Russian war crime committed south of Velika Novosylka, where they destroyed another dam and flooded the river Mokry Yaly in order to stop the Ukrainian counteroffensive. We also saw Russian bombers, Russian Shaheds attacking Ukrainian cities continuously every single night, every single day. Tonight we worked together with our guys around Kiev. I'm talking about one of our mobile groups. We frequently have such, like business trips around Kiev, so to say. And this night was more or less calm. Nothing, no emergency happened. However, tonight several Shahed drones were spotted and intercepted South Ukraine, Mykolaiv Oblast, Odessa. And to my surprise, as soon as I returned home, we witnessed the missile strike on Kiev. I know that the Russians used 12 missiles. They launched 6 caliber cruise missiles from the territory of the Black Sea. They were fired by the Russian fleet. And then 6 Kinjal missiles, the magical Narnian orc maids from Mithril, and shit like that. And those were intercepted. And again, the funniest thing was that exactly the moment when Kiev was attacked by Russian missiles, leaders of the African countries arrived to Kiev, and while being attacked, they tried to convince our president or government to peacefully negotiate with the Russian invaders, Russian terrorists. And while doing this, they had to hide in the shelter from the Russian missiles that were fired at Kiev. So we saw several attacks that were conducted on Kryvyi Rih. This city was attacked several times in a row, several nights. Unfortunately, there were hits reported, there were casualties. Also, there was an attack conducted on Odessa. They hit McDonald's. Now it's freaking personal. And the success of the air defense around Kiev, in my opinion, is absolutely legendary, because all of Ukrainian Patriot systems were already destroyed 2.5 times, according to Putin, who said yesterday that Russia already destroyed 5 Patriot systems, not just systems, 5 Patriot complexes around Kiev. Basically, what he said was...
Oh.
Basically, what he said was, I'm not even trying to mimic him, because it's impossible. But he was like, since we have destroyed 5 Patriot complexes near Kiev, it means that we can destroy any building inside Kiev. And again, they were trying to do that at least for a month and a half. No luck so far.
Well, it's since the Russians, so it's sort of like, okay, they desperately are trying to hit Kyiv. And since with any other military, I'd sit there and say Kyiv is in trouble. But since the Russians are the ones who are desperately trying to hit Kyiv, it strikes me that the safest place in the entire country is probably Kyiv. Even without air defense, but I'm very glad that you guys have got it. But yeah, he's apparently you guys have lost around twice as many Patriot missile systems as you ever had. So that is they're destroying, I guess, future or alternate. I think Russia's in the MCU and they're just destroying them across multiple universes. That's how powerful they are. I also think that George Santos went to the Vladimir Putin School of Politics. But at any rate, I apologize for interrupting, and please continue.
Yeah, basically, I think we all have this spirit of General Zaluzhny, who just keeps dying and going into coma and back like multiple times. And same thing with our air defense. Those Patriots are being destroyed multiple times, but they keep returning back, like Transformers or something. Yeah, but it's people who support Russian terrorism, when they hear Putin, and nothing bothers them when Putin says that Ukraine had 5 Patriot complexes destroyed around Kyiv only. Probably they have like 10 somewhere else. Nothing bothers them because those people are completely calm and laid back kind of people. Nothing bothers them in this universe. And when we trying to show them, trying to direct them towards the fact that are you even sure that you should listen to the bullshit shared by Putin and Russian propagandists and shit, because what they say doesn't exist in this world. What they say exists in Narnia, not on Earth. They be like, but everybody lies. I mean, like, everybody does propaganda. Like, everybody does that. People, like, there are literally people who have no freaking idea what propaganda is.
Yeah, no, that's so I do want to, and if I forget, maybe someone in the live chat or one of you gentlemen can remind me. I do want to hit on the soldier who I think the intercept was of him basically saying, I'm starting to think I may be fighting on the wrong side. What were you going to say, Commander?
No, I was going to say they've been doing this kind of propaganda BS since the start of this. I mean, even before we said we were considering sending Abrams tanks, they had already announced that they destroyed like 15 or 20 of them on the front lines. It's like, how are you destroying things that aren't even there? Ooh, that's a good imagination.
Well, and
basically everything is possible when you lie.
Yeah, that's pretty evident.
And I think it's important to realize and to discuss that sort of psychology. It's pathological, and it's existed. And Commander, correct me if I'm wrong. It's existed since like either the start of the Tsars or even before the Tsars. This is a cultural thing in Russia, and it's something that they've done with or without a war. They treat truth, information, and their relationship to the government not only very differently than we do, but in a way that without really learning about it and either immersion or engaging with it is basically almost impossible for Westerners to comprehend. Is that roughly accurate?
Oh yeah. It's a very deep-seated psychological condition, I think. I mean, it's to the extent that if you watch some of the interviews that are being done now, man in the street kind of things, where somebody will stop them and this is for YouTube, what's your opinion on this or whatever. They're actually starting to refer to Putin as the Tsar.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, I mean, and they're reverting to that mentality that they've always had. You can't question the Tsar. He is God's anointed on earth. Whatever he decides is the right thing for the country. And it's, borrowing that old phrase of when I think it was Louis XIV, l'État c'est moi, which is the state is me. I am the nation. That's the way the Russians are viewing this situation, not just at the very top, but in large case down to the lower levels. Putin is Russia. And if he says something is going to be this way, it must be true. It must be the thing that has to get done.
We've discussed this casually, and I think we should actually just do a more formal show, you and I, so that people who are interested in the hows and whys of this, because I think it is interesting. But we've discussed it at length before. It is a qualitative difference from just regular what we think of as propaganda from even Fox News, and that's saying something. So we will get into it, and I think it's worth a discussion. I'd also like to point out that Rick the Ukrainian, he's a really nice guy. We've chatted some. We also had him on here, and I've spoken with him a bit. He is. I wish he could be a professional YouTuber. I wish he could do this full time. He's got a full time job, but in his spare time, he dubs the interviews with prisoners, and you see a lot of this, and you see the shock that they have. And Starsky, you told us that Russians would ask captured Ukrainians, like, "Why are you shooting at us? Why are you? We're here to liberate you." And it's like, wow. So I think all that's very interesting. I'm hoping if one of our mods could drop a link to Rick the Ukrainian so that people can see him, and it's probably worth putting also in the description, but I think that's worthy of looking into. So Starsky, anyways, so you were saying, so apparently they've destroyed more of these batteries, but nonetheless, you had said that you were very pleased with the air defense over Kyiv, and it sounds like it really is, in fact, extraordinarily effective and has been for some time. So anyways, please continue with updating us on what's been going on.
Basically, recently there was an interview of a commander of Air Defense Brigade here in Kyiv, and he said that when this first 𝐒𝐚𝐬 strike happened, he said his guys were so impressive because they only had seconds to react, and he said yes, they had like simulations previously. They tried to simulate this sort of attack, and sometimes they would fail, of course, but he said he would never expect them to be so fast, so precise and professional, but again, it's a big surprise that actually Patriot system can do such things, intercepting. Well, rather it's like, we should be surprised with the level of terror Russian brainwashing. That's really what we should be, because again, this hypersonic orthodox blast Narnian missile that flies faster than the speed of light, it was advertised so many years, and I remember then when Putin was advertising this missile, presenting this missile for the first time in public, they were showing some device on the big screen that looked like a missile. Factically, it was a concept of a Boeing aircraft flipped upside down, because they had no I swear you can Google it, because they
couldn't even build a convincing model.
You can see the tin foil coming off, and then somebody's just like, yeah, that's duct tape, but we'll fix it, it'll be real soon.
Yeah, and it's the same sort of bullshit as Robot Boris the robot, those electronic pets wearing balaclava masks with those anti-tank missiles attached to their backs and shit like that. So this is the level of, Russian propaganda we're talking about. I don't believe that I ever saw something like that on any other TV, American TV. You know, when there are those TV shows about like futuristic American weapons, the electromagnetic cannon that consumes the same power as like 3 New York cities in order to shoot a single, projectile and stuff like that. Okay, I never saw anything like, like Russians do, that this is not just weapon, it's a god's weapon, because only in the hands of a Russian warrior that has this deep Russian soul, this Russian microcosmos inside of him, and the spirit of his ancestors who conquered the universe and destroyed Berlin and ate Hitler and peed on him and stuff. That's what they usually do, like all the time. They were presenting this AK-12, the 100th series of AK, a bit more balanced type of AK, their modern rifle, and they were saying that this AK uses the traditional approach to the building of rifles in Russia, but it uses completely new approach to its internal systems and yada yada and blah blah. Basically the same AK with a different gas tube, like that's all. And the stock that was copy pasted from like M16, okay, M4, and by the way, this gas tube was made from such a horrible materials that first rifles that were produced in this series, they had to remove them, okay, and change those gas tubes because they were rotting. The corrosion was so bad, so they had to improve those gas tubes without any more or less acceptable results, but still.
So basically,
yeah,
Putin likes American television, and he was watching MacGyver and thought that it was a documentary. So, all right. So sorry. So moving forward.
Yeah.
I think I did. I cut Starsky off for a bad joke that if you weren't born in the 90s, you absolutely would not have gotten. But at any rate, 90s or prior, so I apologize.
It's an airplane.
Yeah.
It's like fighting with the Russian Orthodox cross. This contactless combat. If viewers never saw that, they should freaking Google this. Contactless combat using Russian Orthodox cross. That stuff is so popular there. Oh my God! Not only Russian ancestors were fighting using an Orthodox cross, because those Tatars and Mongols and whatever, they don't believe in Jesus Christ, but the Russians, they're Orthodox people. They were basically bred by made by Jesus Christ and
faith-based warfare.
Yeah, and not only they fought with this cross, but this art of contactless sparring using Orthodox cross, this magical duel, was passed to their ancestors and their son and grandkids, and later this, for example, 𝐒𝐚𝐦𝐚𝐫 was a guru, a prophet of contactless combat in Russia. So he was training the Russian Spetsnaz, because if Russian Spetsnaz guy gets captured, for example, by like Talibs or Ukrainians, then he can use his magical powers to. Guys, I'm like I'm literally quoting what they're saying on their TV. Okay, I'm not mad, not that mad at least. So Spetsnaz can use all his knowledge about those invisible energy fields and stuff, so he can manipulate people and make them kill themselves and stuff like that. Kadachnikov was a legendary person in Russia, basically, because if you ever saw like a guru, okay, Russian guru, master, ninja master, and he usually explains something, showing something, on his subordinate, and there's a bunch of guys that stand around them, and they all wear camouflage, like this Berezka camouflage, Russian stuff, camouflage and sneakers. So this Kadachnikov was the dude who created this. He started wearing, like military uniform and doing that, magic, just blowing people apart and pushing them with mind bullets. So
I'd like to point something out. So, and this is my Russian teacher, when I was in high school, I had a tutor who taught me Russian, and the classes were 2 hours. He'd come over 2 hours twice a week, would do Russian, and sometimes we did strictly Russian, and sometimes we just sort of would talk about either Russia or this or that. So now, his name was Oleg Galina, and he had decided very early on in his life that he was going to get out of Russia as quickly as possible, the Soviet Union. He hated it. He thought everything was propaganda, everything was lies, people were manipulated, you had to be paranoid your entire life. So he applied for a visa, and he was going to defect, and just applying for a visa, if you don't have a reason, his life was instantly in jeopardy. He could have been killed, and he knew it, but he did it anyway. And it took about 10 years for an application to even go through and be considered, let alone to be able to leave after that. But he bribed a official at their State Department with a case of scotch, which was considered sort of about right for the level of request that he was having. And he eventually, it didn't take as long as it could have, and I think he got out in about a year and a half with his wife and his daughter. So here he and I are talking. And he would tell me this story. And so this is a man who risked his life to leave. And he was still fully inculcated into that way of thinking. And he would say to me, well, we have our paper Pravda, and it's called The Truth. And he goes, it actually does never lie. Pravda never has said anything that wasn't true. And I was just like, you risked your life to leave this country because of how bad it is, and you still can't get your head around it. He goes, no, sometimes they manipulate so they're not saying what it sounds like. So, for example, when we built our first hovercraft, I said, wait, define hovercraft. You mean like that thing with the air? He goes, no, it flies on energy fields and can. I was just like, oh, dear Lord. He goes, now, they said that it had attained flight, and it did, but only for like a second or two. So they weren't being as honest as you'd like, but what they said was true. I was like, okay. He goes, and then when we developed the healing machine that can use radio waves to heal any injury and even bring people back when they've been dead, as long as it hasn't been more than 8 or 9 minutes, this machine, and I was just like, and he spoke perfect English, really highly educated guy. He was an engineer, and again, risked his life to get out of this country because he hated the propaganda, and he would say these things with some measure of pride that his people had accomplished this stuff. And there was the brain waves, and there was a lot of other really scary technology that I'm just like, you realize nobody can do these things. And I learned not to say that because he got offended, despite his hatred of that country and his desperate desire to get out. And thankfully,
Yeah, no, I was going to say it's a superstition that pervades so much of that culture. It was it's magic. We got to believe it. But the flip side that's even more strange and disturbing. My dad used to work with a lot of defectors, doing interviews and such. And he said it was startling, the number of them who, after they'd been in the U.S. or England or wherever it was they had settled for maybe a year, they wanted to go back. And they would explain to them, you realize if you go back, they're going to shoot you right there at the airport. You're not going to survive if you go back. But I have to. My Russian homeland calls to me. It's just mind-bogglingly weird.
Yeah,
I remember I read some article in a Russian magazine regarding the weapon shooting like brain waves. So they were saying that Russians used this this weapon, those beams of death, during the coup in Moscow, 1993, and they were saying that, like, for example, there were people, those protesters, and sometimes they would go completely berserk and they would start like killing like each other, and stuff like that, like all of a sudden, and stuff like it was like the most popular Russian magazine dedicated, to like military weapons and stuff. So there's a lot of that crap that was produced by the Russian folklore over the years. I find it completely hilarious to read or watch those old shows. Again, the most popular shows on the Russian TV were shows dedicated to like people with supernatural abilities, aliens. I remember when I was a small kid in the Soviet Union, guys, it was 1989, and we had a magazine. The main audience, the main target audience for this magazine, it was like teenagers. It was called 𝐒𝐚𝐬 Technic, young technician, and in this magazine they would explain how to make stuff out of crap, and it was very, very popular in the Soviet Union for one simple reason. You couldn't have nice things in the Soviet Union. If you wanted to have a model of Mars rover or Lunar rover, right? You couldn't buy it. You couldn't just go to a toy store and buy it, because in the toy store you would find a bunch of balloons, all of the same color, a bunch of my God, 𝐒𝐚𝐬𝐿, the dude who trained cats, and for some reason he was made a doll or whatever, and like Vanka-Vstanka, Matryoshkas and shit like that. That's all. Several tanks. That's all. So if you wanted a toy, you had to freaking build it yourself. That's why in this Young Technician magazine, there were all kinds of recipes of on how to build an airplane using like a box of matches, or how to build a car using a little electric motor and this soap case, plastic case for
to be clear, they're talking about making toys, not actual airplanes and automobiles.
Oh, yeah, well, let's be clear. Yeah, let's clarify, just because we are talking about Russians.
Yeah, and also in this magazine they had like some sci-fi. It was not bad. I was like 4 years old or something like that, but I still I could read when I was a very, very young, very, very small kid. So I enjoyed all that stuff, even though I couldn't understand like half of it. But in this very magazine, again, it was it was produced for like Soviet teenagers, okay? And not only Soviet teenagers, but smart Soviet teenagers, nerdish Soviet teenagers who could construct things using crap, like matches, soap, toothbrushes, and shit like that. And you could build like a toy truck using like electric motors, and you had to sit there, so in this magazine they had I think a separate category. I might be wrong, but I read this. I still remember this because this shit gave me freaking nightmares. So they had a separate section in this magazine dedicated to aliens and extraterrestrial contacts, and they had like description of different kinds of aliens. Some of them were like reptilians, some of them were like normal people, like completely like normal people. Some of them looked like Aryans or Atlants, high, like tall people with light hair, blue eyes. Some of them were like gray aliens. Some of them looked like octopuses or something like that. And of course, they all had like different spaceships. Okay, there were like triangular spaceships. There were like circular spaceships and stuff like that. And they were feeding this to like Soviet teenagers, like for real.
But purportedly making it true.
Well,
yeah, this wasn't fiction per se. This was presented as, these are the real aliens that are out there among you right now.
Yeah.
Well, and there's a little bit of that in the U.S., but it's very. I mean, the U.S. example is you read a Spider-Man comic, and at the end, send us $10, and we'll send you the glasses that you put on, and they're X-ray glasses, and you can see through clothing and all that other good stuff. But it's not. I mean, those glasses are an ad by a sham company at the end of a comic book. They're not the comic book itself saying, "Here's how you make glasses that will." But anyways, I'm sorry, Starsky. I think I cut you off there.
Yeah, so it was so amazing, and I was like reading like true stories written by like witnesses. Some of them were like kidnapped by those aliens and given a ride around the solar system, and then there were stories from like the place of Tunguska meteorite crash, and there were like Soviet Boy Scouts. They were called pioneers in Soviet Union. Basically, same stuff, only communists. Okay, and like a group of pioneers went out, for like an expedition or whatever, and they encountered like aliens in this very area of this meteorite crash, and those stories, like there were hundreds of them. I liked them so much, but at the same time they were horrifying. I was a small kid and I literally couldn't sleep like for the next 3 nights because of that. So that's one thing I remember.
You'll notice the complete lack of alien rectal probes with this, which would be a major component of American stories of aliens.
Well, that's how you know they're fake, right? Because who's getting an anal probe in the Russian stories? It's clearly made up. What else would
be an alien here?
Which reminds me of a joke which I'd love to tell, but I want to make sure that we cover everything that's going on because it's been a lot. Now there's a couple other topics I want to, so I'll skip the joke. It's a long one. It's hilarious. I'll do it another time. So what else? Anything else that you feel that we should discuss, or that is going on that you feel we should be updated on, and then we'll we'll talk about some of the significant things that have happened. I also have some super chats, so actually I'll get to those after Starsky's done.
Well, one of the, let's say, most discussed updates in the recent days is the alleged death/injury/resurrection of Adam 𝐍𝐤𝐚𝐬, the right hand of Kadyrov. So the story is following. Kadyrov, in his Telegram channel, posted a message saying that Adam 𝐍𝐤𝐚𝐬 was dead. He couldn't contact this individual, and he was calling Ukrainian military intelligence to tell him the whereabouts of the body of 𝐍𝐤𝐚𝐬, so he could retrieve it. And Kadyrov also offered a very, very generous reward for this body. Then the official press service of the Russian Duma, of the Russian Parliament, also published an article saying that actually 𝐍𝐤𝐚𝐬 was alive, but he was very, very badly injured. And the next day, a video emerged in the Russian social media, in the Chechen TV, I believe, as well, showing 𝐍𝐤𝐚𝐬 completely fine, and there was like this green field with a big map, in the middle of this field, and Kadyrov, 𝐍𝐤𝐚𝐬, and several of his subordinates were sitting around the map discussing stuff. The funniest thing, of course, not like it was shocking actually, because first of all, during all this speech, the video is like the one that I saw, for example, it was like 1.5 minutes. They were discussing like what happens on the front lines, their front in Kherson. I don't remember Russians having a front in Kherson since the last year, actually. And what was the most shocking was that, first of all, Kadyrov never said Don. I was like, is that even him? And another thing was, when he talked, his lips were completely out of sync with the sound, and it was so obvious. I was like, how can you do that? I tried, I failed. I cannot do that physically.
Yeah, you use deep fake technology, and people will be gullible enough to fall for it.
Well, you can also use like editing technology. It's even easier. You can save man hours by using AI and stuff. But they published this video, okay, and they started saying that no, like everything was fake, and basically what the press service of Duma said was also fake, because here he is, So
the map is actually it's like a scavenger hunt. It's find this guy, and they're saying, okay, so next week we want you to hide in the abandoned well over here, and then the week after go to this place and hide in the barn. And whoever finds you, they get a colonelcy in the Russian army, and they can go lead them troops in battle.
Yeah, the most the question that I still cannot answer is like, how could 𝐍𝐤𝐚𝐬 teleport from Ukraine straight to Chechnya that very day? Okay, I believe he could like fly an airplane, but at the same time, if they could reach this dude, they could at least publish some message, to calm people down and say, guys, he's alive, everything is fine, But currently it looks very, very suspicious. Same story happened with this General Tushayev that again was allegedly killed in Hostomel. So we received a message that he died due to the artillery strike. Later, Kadyrovites published some kind of video with Tushayev, like briefly showing this man. And that was the last thing that we heard about Tushayev since 2022. And 1 month ago, basically 4 weeks ago, his regiment was being sent to Ukraine, okay? And they showed a video, showed his regiment. I believe there were like 2 companies, maybe, max. And they showed this regiment, those like super Kadyrovite special forces, ninjas and stuff. And for some reason, there were no signs of Tushayev whatsoever, like anywhere in the area, because usually, I might be wrong, but I served in the army for the recent 9 years. Whenever your troops are being sent to the front lines, usually your commander is there, because your commander, like, it's his responsibility. He should be there. He should say, guys, force be with you and shit. No, nothing like that. Again, highly suspicious. I'm not saying that he's dead, but it's highly suspicious.
Well, so let me do this. Here's what we're going to do. I'm going to run through all of the super chats. I'm just going to run through them, and then some of them are questions for Starsky, so that I will, after running through all of them, I'm going to make sure that all the questions get asked, and then we're going to go to Commander Macmillan and ask about his opinion about what he's seeing in terms of the offensive, what he would expect over the next couple of days, and we'll get some more on that, and then we'll kick it back to Starsky. So for the super chats, and there's appears to have been a hiccup in the super chats briefly earlier. It does appear to be fixed now. Thank you. And as a reminder, and somebody had mentioned too about supporting the show. The super chats do help the show. Now what's going to happen is all of these super chats go entirely to the charity of Operator Starsky's choice. I think it is the absolute minimum that we can do. We appreciate having him here, and it's I think it's great for us to be able to have that resource to talk about this. So all of the super chats go to the charity of his choice. He has chosen the Vatra volunteer organization. They help in Ukraine and also provide direct help to Starsky's units. So it's I think it's a great way to help. And what we do is just whatever the back end it says that came in for in time. We got to wait like 30 days because of the whole, but that's what goes to his organization. So it's still a way to support in time because YouTube notices that, and then it helps us in the algorithm and all those other things. But it's also for these shows, that's the way it's always going to be. And we're very proud of that. And so all of these super chats are going to be going to the Vatra volunteer organization. Helps us, helps them. It's marvelous. So thank you all very much for your generous contributions. Level 70 for $6.99 Canadian. Hey, Starsky. Does Ukraine have a sufficient supply of anti-air missiles to fend off these daily Russian attacks? Also, a follow-up, Operator Starsky. This was N Hill, $5. Operator Starsky, thank you for your daily updates. A super sticker from Yvonne Way. Thank you for that. Killer Rabbit of... Can I mute Macmillan so he doesn't hear me, because he's going to criticize however I pronounce this. I'm going to get shit for it. Carbonog. I think I made borscht yesterday in my crock pot. It was a Ukraine recipe by Ukrainian grandmother. I did not add potatoes. Vinegar, and sugar. Yes, we'll get there. Suzanne Niffen, $10 sticker. Thank you. Yahweh, 330 Canadian. Yahweh again. Super chat and stickers confirmed working. We appreciate that. It looks like they were out for a little bit. Another super sticker coffee, both from Suzanne and from Kevin Legare. I hope I got that right. Thank you all very much. We really do appreciate it. I also know Starsky really appreciates it too. So thank you for that. Another super sticker, $6.99 Canadian from Paulus Play. Oh, that's from Lynn Stefan. Oh, Jesus, I'm having Stephanie. I'm already dyslexic, so sometimes with the names. I did miss one. Also, 1999 from Teresa and Elizabeth. Okay. I'm gonna have to sit down and like spend an hour. No, it's gonna be like a total of probably 8 to 10 hours. And if I do that, I'll hopefully get back being able to read this without like stuttering through and sounding like a 5-year-old. But I'm gonna try it. Slava Vesim Geroyam Ukraine. I believe that is correct. It's close enough. Starsky's laughing his ass off. I can see your face. I can see your face, Starsky. Could you at least hide the camera before like laughing so hard you cough up a lung? Let's see. And then Paulus playing when the stars align and the blue moon rises, I need to taste Ukrainian food and beer. Operator Starsky, thank you for your service. Slava Ukraine. And then last one, $5 from Claire Noel. Love from Buffalo, New York. Greetings to Fluffy and Fooch, and I think they will have to make an appearance before the end of the show. Once again, thank you, all of you, and we have to go through it a bit quickly. We've got a hard limit coming up at about a half hour, so I want to make sure that we get all the information and discussion we want in, so it's not a lack of appreciation that I'm not taking the time I usually do to go over the super chats. I want to make sure we've got Starsky here. I want to make sure we cover everything, and that's really our primary goal for the audience. So thank you very much for your support, and we will make sure that that goes where it needs to. So we'll start with the first question. Does Ukraine have a sufficient supply of anti-air missiles to fend off the daily Russian attacks, Operator Starsky?
Before I answer this question, I would like to address another question, which is more important regarding borscht. Borscht without potato is not a legit borscht. At the same time, I'm not sure if you should add like vinegar to borscht. I don't think that we do that. So I checked. And apparently tomatoes and potato were brought to Europe around 16th century or 17th, around 16th century. So these things usually like make me curious because we have a lot of cuisine with like potatoes, with tomatoes and stuff like that. I'm like, I often ask myself, what did we eat before that? But as for borscht, you should definitely have potatoes in borscht. Otherwise, it's just, water with cabbage is the same type of Russian national cuisine that is called shit. I swear this is how it's called, shit. So it's different.
At first I thought you were joking, so I was like, we've been slamming Russian cuisine, everything for a while. I thought it was a joke, but okay.
It's shit.
Yeah, I realize there's no T, but for an American, you hear the T whether it's there or not. I'm just saying.
I know. So yeah, borscht must be much more tasty and much more rich. Rich with the ingredients. That's what makes it, Ukrainian cuisine. Regarding the missiles, I'm sure that we have the exact amount of missiles required to intercept the known amount of Russian cruise missiles. So, for example, if Russians have, I think, approximately 900 cruise missiles still in their storage, then I believe that we have the appropriate amount of anti-air missiles to intercept them.
Yeah, and you'll also notice that every time we get a new aid package approved, it includes additional surface-to-air missiles in that package. And that's not just us, the U.S., but I mean the West. One's coming from all the different countries.
Yeah, absolutely. You see, the difference between Russia and the rest of the world that supports Ukraine, specifically Europe and the US, is that the annual GDP of Russia is around $1.5 trillion a year. The combined GDP of the US and the European Union is 40 times of that. I think even Texas has bigger GDP than Russia. And what it means that literally those countries that support Ukraine, not only verbally, but with weaponry and vehicles and other measures, they are able to produce enough missiles for Ukraine to be able to protect itself.
That's very fortunate. We've talked a bit about the missiles too, especially the Patriot ones are extraordinarily expensive, so you don't use them on just any incoming attack, but the ones that basically the Patriots are the only ones capable of shooting down. So as long as everyone's cautious about it, hopefully they'll be continuing to get enough ammunition to outpace Russia bringing in a ringer from Iran using drones, which is it's a whole nother thing. Commander, when you take a look at the map and the progress that's been made, and when you see what's been going on, I guess I have two questions. First of all, is there anything else this week that happened that jumped out at you that you think we should discuss? So that's my first question. My second question is, looking at everything, what's your overall impression of how things are going now? Is it what you'd expect? Do you think the pace will maintain or kick up or go down?
I do have one question for Starsky, and we keep hearing that the Russian Legion, or whatever they are, the partisans, for lack of a better word, that are were in the Belgorod Oblast are still there occupying some of those towns. Is that true?
Yes, so they are still there since the beginning of their second raid to Belgorod Oblast, Shebekino. They are still there, still fighting, which is the most impressive thing, because
it blows my mind. We know from inside reporting from people in the Kremlin, I say, that one act, more than anything else that's been going on in the past couple of weeks, panicked the folks inside the Kremlin. The fact that Russians were attacking into Russia and holding territory against the forces they were sending to respond. So the fact that they're still there is just mind-boggling. It suggests to me that they can't come up with a cohesive way to deal with it, because it's not a big force. It's not like it's a brigade or anything. It's I think 2 tanks and 4 armored personnel carriers and a couple of Hummers, and that's it, But they're holding this ground, and everything the Russian MVD forces that they're sending to respond to it are just getting thrown back. It's stunning.
Well, imagine that. Imagine that happening in the U.S., right? I mean, a hostile force comes into the U.S. with about 100 guys and some tanks and Humvees and so on and so forth, and says, "We're occupying Hawaii." How long do you think that lasts? Just out of curiosity, and it's not sort of meant as a brag, but just like, I mean, you'd think Russia was purportedly a superpower. You'd think that, and it's just like, they're like, what do we do? There's 100 guys with tanks. Oh, well, I don't know.
I think that Hawaii wouldn't even call up the National Guard or ask the Marines at 𝐒𝐚𝐬 to respond. They just send in a SWAT team. But it's mind-boggling. It really is.
Police forces in the U.S. can. I'm sorry, I just got to interrupt. Police forces.
No, go ahead.
There was a time when everybody remembers there was a guy who stole a tank. He actually stole a tank, and he was going through, I think it was in Texas, and And the police
Nope.
stopped them. It took a while. It wasn't
Diego.
easy. Oh, San Diego. That's right. It was San Diego. Thank you. And the police stopped them. They didn't have to call out the entire. It wasn't easy. I'm not. And these. So yeah, Hawaii could literally probably fend this off with their own police forces. It wouldn't be easy, but they could do it. It's like, oh dear God. Anyways, I did cut you off, so please continue, Commander.
The situation at the front, everybody keeps saying, oh, it's the offensive. It isn't. I don't think it is. And here's why I don't think it is. It's probing actions looking for where to start the offensive. And I can say this with some confidence because we know that Ukraine has assembled between 9 to 12 well-equipped mechanized brigades for this offensive. And thus far, the civilian intelligence apparatus on YouTube has only really been able to identify 4 of those as being involved at the front. That means there's somewhere between half or over half to 2/3 of all those forces that were assembled for this offensive still being held in a central reserve to exploit success. Once they achieve a breakthrough of the line, I think that's when you're going to see those guys go in. And that's when, instead of these little thin blue edges that are nibbling away at the corners of the front line, you're going to see suddenly, just like we did with Kharkiv and later Kherson last year, we're going to see just blue flooding those areas wherever that is that they're going in. Because
let me see if I can. So let me see if I got it straight. I'm going to put some words in your mouth. You can tell me if I've been accurate or not. But so what you're saying is, despite that, we're actually seeing really rather good progress, despite the fact that the Russians are being pushed back, and despite the fact that we're seeing liberations. What you're expecting is, once there really seems to be a break somewhere, which we can expect at some point reasonably soon, instead of just this pace kind of continuing, a lot more resources that are currently still held in reserve are going to go straight towards that break, and then we're going to see progress really on an order of magnitude, it sounds like, higher than what we're seeing now. Is that roughly what you're
Absolutely.
expecting? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you have to look, for example, at the last time there was a really big mechanized war, which would be, what went on in Iraq when we did that attack, or when we did Desert Storm liberating Kuwait. And once an actual major offensive kicks in, it's almost the force of nature. It just sweeps everything aside. Eventually it will come to a stop because it either runs out of supplies or because it erodes its own strength in fighting. But you get these major movements that you can see even on a tiny map, on the TV screen when the commentator is talking about it. We haven't seen that yet, and those forces are being held, and when they get committed, we're all going to know. What we're seeing now are the probing actions looking for where to go in. I'm sure they know exactly where they want to penetrate. We don't know that yet. They're making good progress. But we're also seeing losses. And as Starsky said last time when we talked, we're going to see Ukrainian forces taking losses. It's the nature of warfare. Because you see a Leopard tank and a couple of Bradleys broken down at a crossroads, that does not mean, the Russians stopped the offensive. No, it means there was a local setback. And you look at this actual situation and you say, okay, this is to be expected. And most of the troops that were involved in that setback managed to get out alive. So that's...
And not to be blasé about it, but we call that Tuesday. it's a war. There are going to be casualties and losses on both sides. If there aren't, somebody's not doing their job, unfortunately. I mean, it's like if they're, the only way Ukraine would suffer no losses is if they didn't try to take any territories. So it's, you know.
Exactly.
All right. So it sounds like you're very optimistic about things going forward. So let me ask you this. I mean, for me personally, so I'll prime the pump a bit, but for me personally, I'm concerned about what happens as Russia gets more desperate. Is that a concern for you? And if not, what is amongst your top concerns right now, despite the obviously a lot of reason to feel good?
We've talked about this before, and I think it's the rat in the corner syndrome I've talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
Putin and his inner circle have to find some way to extricate themselves from this mess of their own creation. And they can't figure out how to do that. And as the situation goes from bad to worse, they're going to become increasingly desperate and will try increasingly stupid things to right the sinking ship. And that, to me, is the biggest worry right now, is what form that's going to take and how ugly it's going to be. But I think before this is over, we're going to see something terrible happen.
All right, we've got I've got about 20 minutes, and then I've got a hard deadline. I think we're going to make it, but I do have some questions for both of you that I want to make sure we get to. Titan asked, what effect is the apparent hanging back of military officers likely to have on the Russian troops? And I think I want to sort of pass this to both of you, expand on that just slightly, which is we had heard a lot about really terrible morale on the front lines in Russia. They were terrified of this offensive, which is it hasn't even really started in the sense that Macmillan is talking about, and they're already falling back. They're already having problems. Has this had an impact on morale on the front lines? Do we think it will continue to? What are we expecting morale-wise going forward, recognizing that it's pure speculation? Oh, Lance, you are getting, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to, yeah, thank you. Yeah, Lance, we're getting a lot of background noise. It's hard to...
Yes, I've got airplanes flying overhead. I can't control that. I'm
all right. No worries. What I'm going to do is I'm going to. You muted. Perfect. Or it just stopped. So anyway, so what can we expect on the Russian front lines from the admittedly very limited amount that we have, but the fact that they are still facing down the barrel of a very, very large gun? So I'll start with the commander.
So, morale-wise, we know things are Russian cabbage soup. It really is shit. There are plenty of intercepted phone calls being made by Russian soldiers talking to wives, girlfriends, mothers, whoever in the back, back home. And many of them are saying things like, I haven't seen an officer in 2 weeks. So the troops are kind of being left on their own at the front. Orders are being pushed up from well behind the lines where it's safe. And understand, I'm not talking about, I haven't seen the colonel or the general in 2 weeks. I'm talking about, I haven't seen the platoon lieutenant in 2 weeks.
Jesus.
Yeah. So there's literally nobody in charge at the actual front in some areas. It's not universal. Let's be clear on that. We know there are severe supply shortages. We know that there's a lot of fatalistic feeling. These guys are talking about feeling as if they're nothing more than cannon fodder. They're there to die, and that's the only reason they're there, is because they're holding this imaginary line until the bosses in Moscow come up with a solution. And they've written themselves off. You listen to some of these phone calls, and it's heartbreaking, honestly. I mean, I know they're the evil Russians and we should hate them, but I look at the humanity of these guys and what they must be going through, and I can't help but be sympathetic. That's one of the reasons I'm so optimistic about how the offensive is going to do, because once it gets rolling, I think we're going to see a lot of these troops simply bolting and running, which leads to my next statement. There are now videos coming out, and something else. There are now videos coming out on YouTube, and you don't want to post them because they're that, not safe for work kind of thing. But it shows Russian blocking detachments. This is something that Stalin put into place in World War II to stop troops from retreating. They put NKVD troops in a second line behind the front line. And anytime the troops started retreating, the Russian NKVD, the security forces, would shoot their own troops. And we have actual video of this going on at the front now. That shows you how absolutely desperate the situation is becoming for them, that their own troops are running away in sufficient numbers that they're having to post blocking detachments to kill their own men to keep them in the trenches.
Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, and I mean, we've seen it before. Pickett's charge was such a crazy, they essentially, they had people behind that trying to keep everybody moving forward. But I think this is a new order of magnitude. And I just realized I probably shouldn't have mentioned it because since you know so much more about this than I do, we're probably going to get into a discussion that we may not have time for. So, Operator Starsky, as we wrap up, and I do want to remind everybody, by the way, come join us on the Discord. Commander Macmillan is there. And I don't know if any of that video is there. If you have it, Commander, you can post it. We have a Ukrainian channel. We cover everything we absolutely can. Some of the things we cover, you cannot just have on a open channel on Discord. We do have an explicit channel for Ukraine. It's not there for if you're interested in just gore and violence. We're not the Discord for you as it is. But for, unfortunately, as part of a full rounded understanding of what's going on in the news, we do have to cover some things that, you have to be prepared for, and you can't just have on an open channel. That's the channel for it. We do have it. And I think if it's something that isn't going to trigger people, it's something that you should, take a look at and see, because it is part of understanding what a war is like. I really get triggered by people who say that they're going to opine on how often we should go to war and what countries we should attack, and they don't actually know what a war looks like. So if it's something that you think can help inform you, we do have that on our channel. But we also have a lot of other stuff, gaming and other topics. We're a news show. Ukraine is I think right now the most important thing we cover, but it's by no means the only one. So having said that, come join us on the Discord and catch up with myself, the commander, and any of our other guests. Operator Starsky, so what are you looking for in the next coming weeks and months? What are you hoping? What would constitute a success for you in this as we go forward? And what are you most concerned of? What's in the back of your mind that you're saying this could be a problem and we just need to be aware of it and stay ahead of it?
I'm looking forward to see a lot of Russian terrorists running away, like they did in Kherson and Kharkiv, Liman, Izium, Balaklia. So I believe that we will see that because the Russians enjoy participating in a winning war, and they are told that they are being told that they are winning, of course, even though in the past 478 days they not only they didn't manage to capture any of 22 major cities of Ukraine, to be able to brag with at least some progress, because even Mariupol is not a major city; it's a small city. But they also managed to lose Kherson, the only major city they've had. And currently they are in position when they have to defend themselves. It's not a winning war. It's not something they enjoy, because one thing is when you go into a foreign country as a conqueror, right? And you can, do whatever the conquerors do, steal in toilets and stuff. But when you are told to sit there in a trench and die, it's not something that anybody would like to do. But that's exactly what they're doing. So we will see a lot of Russians running because they are. This is what they are good at. Everybody wants to leave in the end. My concern is, as always, the hybrid warfare, the signs of this hybrid warfare we can see in different European countries, anti-NATO protests and things like that. It's very dangerous. It's dangerous for the countries that are members of NATO, because removing those countries from NATO is one of the main Russian objectives, so they could, eventually take this country, bring their Russian peacekeepers to protect Russian population of France, for example, or Czech Republic. So that's
Or
one
Hawaii.
of, or Hawaii, of course. There's
Lots of
there's a
Russians in
lot.
Hawaii.
There's a lot of Russian people in Hawaii. Also, Hawaii is, is a traditionally Russian land, because people living in Hawaii, they have roots that date back to the times when Russian people came from Chukotka and settled the American plains, and later Polynesia and stuff. Everything started in Russian Chukotka, of course. So
Back before there was hair or weather.
yeah. And everybody knows that Hawaii are like dreaming every day to return back to Mother Russia. It's so that's one of the biggest concerns that I always had, because Russians are not very good at fighting in, let's say, close contact. Okay, but they're good at bullshitting, brainwashing, and lying, and that's exactly what they do and what they will do. Again, today we saw African leaders arriving to Ukraine to convince our president regarding peace talks, regarding trading our territorial integrity for peace, which again we will never have with Russians, because Russians will always want to remove the Ukrainian identity from the face of the earth unless they are stopped. So I hope it answers your question.
It does very much so, and I think that's an interesting, and that's something that has to be reiterated. I think there's a lot of calls for, trying to find a way where, that there can be a peace with Russia, and one of the biggest obstacles to that is there has been a number of peaces with Russia, and yet here we are, and they signed Helsinki Accords promising to never invade, and this was explicit. This was, and recognizing that Ukraine, it was Putin himself who signed it, saying that Ukraine is its own country. We recognize this, and yet here we are. Ukraine isn't a country, and I'm going to show this map that actually says Ukraine is a country, but I'm going to gaslight everybody watching this and say, don't read that writing there. I'm telling you, this map does not say Ukraine. This map explicitly says Ukraine is not a country, and I think the Russian government and Russia in general has long passed the point where you can trust any peace, and it's either they're stopped militarily or they keep coming, and you can slow them down by saying peace. And that's kind of what happened with Crimea, which is that the rest of the world said, well, as long as he doesn't go anywhere else, and it's appeasement, we've talked about that as well, but okay, he took Crimea, and then he's just like, oh, he's going to keep going. It's like, okay, are we going to learn, or are we going to do something? So I don't know. Any final thoughts, Operator Starsky, before we go?
Not really, but there were questions in the chat regarding Fluffy. Fluffy is fine. Fudge is being harassed by Fluffy every single day. You can trust me on that. So everything is fine.
All right. Commander, any final thoughts before we go?
Nope, I think we've covered everything that needs to be covered.
Thank you all very much for the support. We appreciate you guys sharing the content that you like, the likes, the subscriptions, and we've had a couple, all the super chats. We really appreciate it. We didn't quite get to all of them. We got to most. But thank you all very much for that. We will have Operator Starsky on next week. Same bat time, same bat channel, 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We look forward to seeing you then. Starsky, in the meantime, please stay as safe as possible, given the fact that I know your country comes first. But please stay as safe as possible. We look forward to seeing you guys in the Discord. Thank you all once again, and see you next week when we have Operator Starsky back, and we'll also see you for downtime. And I think maybe we'll have to have a discussion on Russia. Obviously, we'll still be following Putin. We've dropped a link to Starsky on the Discord. He will also be on the shills tomorrow. With family permitting, I will be on there as well, and Commander McMillan. So we look forward to seeing you then. Thank you all, and have a great evening.